Hi, and welcome to the studio. I'm so glad you're back for another quick little fun and educational tutorial. We're going to use charcoal today on a texture study, and we're going to do water, which some people freak out about, and there's no need to freak out. It's super fun, and I think you're really going to like it. I think you will be particularly interested in this texture. It is one that people think is extremely hard, and we're about to find out just how challenging it is. So it's this water scene, and I actually am going to, it's not quite the assignment, right? The assignment was find 4 textures, and this kind of is a scene, but the bottom 2/3 is a texture, so we're just gonna go with that. We're gonna go with that. Actually, I'm gonna pull up even more so that the sky isn't really as much a part of my drawing, because it's really not what I'm doing today. I'm not really worried about the horizon and creating depth and making it look like a landscape. I'm more interested in this water texture. Just for funsies though, there's a little bit of crispness on the horizon, but it is blurry back there, so I'm not going to worry about getting that too detailed. I think using the Vine charcoal is perfect for it because it's really mild. It doesn't actually get too dark. You can lay this on really thick and it's still going to look gray. Now, the texture I'm really super interested in is this foreground texture. It kind of starts up here. I'm going to think about it like a mountain. Broke. There's a little crest right here, another one over here, and we're out. We've got a lot of darker value here, and I'm not going to lay on too much. I'm kind of like mapping where my darks will go, but I know that I'm not going to get very dark with this willow charcoal. Notice my marks. Everything that I'm making, all these marks, are going with the flow of the waves. They're not perfect. They're just kind of getting the impression of the direction. This corner's kind of dark, and there's just a whole bunch of lines going top left to bottom right. I'm going to switch. I feel pretty confident. I'm going to switch to compressed charcoal, and I'm going to use the sticks, even though we didn't use them in the last one. Kind of really crave doing this one large scale so we can get the little details, but I'm committed to this size now, this sketchbook page, so let's just do it. And if you're doing these exercises in your sketchbook, then it wouldn't be fair for me to have a huge drawing and expect you to do something similar on a tiny space. I'm going to try to do this on a tiny space as well. I see a lot of really high contrast up here, so I'm going to be going back in with erasers, but I'm trying my best to leave areas white where I think that I'll be adding highlights, because erasing into this is going to be very challenging. So I kind of mapped that out. I know roughly the shape of where I want some shadows. And then I'm using the whole side here for the bigger areas, and then any area that's smaller, I just use the very tip. And notice that if I use, this is a square, and so I can use the tip like this and get like a square mark. I can use the tip sideways and get a much thinner mark, and then I can use it on its side. So we have so many ways to use this, and as you use it and it gets rounder, that mark is going to change. Oh, it's magical. So you're kind of kept on your toes with this kind of medium because it changes shape, and you have to kind of be aware of what kind of shape you want, what kind of mark you want rather. And move your hand, move the piece around in your hand to achieve that different mark. I encourage you when you're doing this to not necessarily do my textures. You're very, very welcome to pick your own textures to do. I would love to see them. Kind of actually ended up with a lot back here. You know what? I'm not going to worry about it. I'm going to move this whole wave up. Can I? I said I was going to do one thing and then ended up with a lot of area up here anyway. Drawing is weird. You can have one idea and it just kind of escapes you as you go. I'm using all different fingers to blend, but if you want to be really fluid with it, I don't put this down. I just use my other fingers to blend, and then I keep this pretty sturdy positioned grip. Nope, I say as I drop it. All right, we got some good, gentle background flow happening. I don't want it too crisp because it's in the background, and by blurring things out that are farther away, it more closely imitates how we see things in real life. I really think now's the time to take a break with laying down charcoal and see what highlights we can get. You're welcome to wash your hands in between if you're freaking out about how mucky this is getting. So I really want this wave at the top to look like it's catching that light, because the light is behind it. It's right here, the sun setting or rising. Feels like a sunset for how warm it is. Who knows? So this click eraser comes in different sizes. Let me show you what it looks like. So it's a mechanical eraser. This one is quite small versus this one. You can kind of see they're going to be different for different size drawings. For the small stuff we're doing, you're going to want this little one. And if you only got the big one, you can either chisel down the side of it so it has a smaller mark for your sketchbook, or what was my or? Work bigger. That was my or. Or you're just going to have to maybe do one texture per sketchbook page. So I'm erasing more than I need to, and then I'll go back in and add some more detail. But it's okay. In painting, I do this as well. It's like kind of take things out or add things and then chisel them back in. So you actually end up drawing the things several times. I told my students that the other day. I said, way to persevere. I had a student trying to do a face and she erased it and resculpted it. This is with charcoal. Erased it, added it again, erased it. She got my help. She erased it. She worked on it. And by the time she was done, she had literally drawn this charcoal face like 6, 7, 8 times over and over, just piece by piece. Redraw the nose. Okay, the nose is working. I'll change the eyes. Okay, now the nose isn't working with the eyes. And she just kept reworking it. I was so proud. That's how you learn, is not to lay it down once and say, oh, it looks remotely normal. I'm going to keep it there. I'm not going to fuss with it. And that doesn't provide you with as much opportunity to learn as it does when you're like persistent. I'm going to make this. I'm going to really figure out how to make this. Now, I'll add a caveat to that advice, which is it's okay to make more drawings and not have them be perfect. And that can be a little better too than just like really, really agonizing over one. My student did this because she was already on her final big sketch. But if you're just at home, just make lots and lots of sketches and try to puzzle through them. And if they don't work out, just move on and keep making more. And don't get caught up in whether or not they're perfect or whether or not they succeeded, quote unquote, because they have succeeded. If you drew them, they've succeeded in advancing your skill. You learned something from them, whether you know it or not. We intuitively build up sort of muscle memory to how we make these marks. So I can't say I have a lot of strategy to what I'm doing right now. I'm just kind of catching highlights. I notice there's a big kind of wide highlight that comes over this area here and down to the right at the front. And then there's going to be some crisp ones up here. I noticed a second little bump that I want to add in. Da-da. I've spent a lot of time in water, and I always look at the way it moves. I don't know necessarily if that's helping me here, but I am really thinking about what it actually is as I do this. That can hold you up as well. That can kind of stump you. So if it's easier for you to just look at values and ignore what you're actually, like the subject matter, ignore the fact it's water and just really focus on where's it dark, where's it light. If that helps, do that. All right, I'm going to use the little point here because it's nice and sharp to get some detail in. And I erased more than I needed to, but now I'm going back in and chiseling in so that that highlight looks thinner. I just lost it a little bit. There we go. So even on this little hill, there's a little crease, I want to say, or a little dark shape in between there. Notice I like messed up and went right back in with an eraser, and it works. There's some triangle shapes in here that are full of shadow. I don't want to touch that just because it looks cool. If you accidentally create areas in your drawing that, aren't from the reference, but they're looking correct, they're looking like water, then don't touch them. Accidental, it's less accidental than you think. It's your intuition figuring things out. I'm just going to say that. Just embrace it. Embrace the compliment. In the same way that I controlled my mark making with the horsehair, I'm also thinking about the water as being mostly horizontal marks. So all the little marks I'm making are going to be mostly horizontal. Maybe up in the wave here, a couple of them get a bit more vertical. So you'll for sure notice that this isn't a perfect mapping or perfect representation of or recreation of my reference photo. I'm using my reference photo to get the flow down, but it actually is a lot easier to create it realistically if I'm not married to that picture reference and I'm just using it to see how the marks are flowing. It's like a general reference. I hope that makes sense. At some point, I step back and I ask myself, is it too busy? Is there a clump that needs to be darker? I think when I step back and just look at this and analyze it, I see a lot less highlight in this water. I think the lines are a lot crisper. And I think there's a lot more gray. So maybe I'll need to use this and kind of get rid of how big these white lines are. And just add a whole bunch more middle value neutral. So notice I'm just kind of shading and pulling things up to a thin highlight and leaving that thin highlight alone. Smoothing out the background a little here. I'm picking up a bit of the darkness here and I'm going to spread it over here. Nice. I see a little bit less of the white highlight. I kind of like that. You could always grab your willow charcoal, which is gray. We know it's not too dark. And we could add a little bit back in here, kind of dimming out some of these highlights if we think we did too much. I'm keeping the piece like going in the same direction as the waves so that if the back marks, it's going to mark at least in the right direction. Because sometimes we're just trying to make a flat mark and the back end is kind of dark as well. So I feel pretty confident about, or comfortable or happy with the white highlights we do have. So I think I'm going to go in soon with the white chalk. I really want the front here to be the crispest. The boldest white. See if we can get this to be. No, this was not working for me, not the same way this little one is. So in order to make this pop out, this ridge at the end, pop out as the lightest, that means I have to calm down over here. And it's hard to do that. This looks pretty as well, but you got to make choices and balance out your piece. And I really just want that top edge of this wave to catch the most light. So I'm going to kind of chill out the other highlights, shading them darker. And all I'm doing is really using this blending stick. I'm not adding any more charcoal. Now this looks way crisper. And I'm going to go in with this white. And confidently emphasize some of these highlights. That caught a little bit of the gray, and so it kind of dulled my highlight down a little because I didn't land this pencil directly on top of an erased highlight. It does really well on top of the erased highlights and not as bold if you add it over charcoal. Kind of nice though, for this instance, for those highlights to be gray. Really light pressure here. Trying to get a bit of this really, really fine, wavy movement back here. This is so subtle. We could have stopped, but oh, that's looking nice. Do you see what I mean? By the little tiny rivulets here that are kind of going in the right direction, but then also doing a bit of their own thing. And I don't see them up front here. This is like more blurred because it's in the foreground. So it's blurred from the camera's focus, but right in the middle where the focus is landing, we see the most detail. We see these little tiny, tiny, tiny lines. And I know I warned you against using this on top of charcoal without erasing first, but in this case, it's working. We wanted gray detail, not white detail. And then we need to kind of finish off this background. And how am I going to do that? I'm going to, if I blur my eyes, the background looks like it's almost the same value as the sky. But I have to add something in the sky, so it's my sky. This page is getting messy, y'all. Let's add the sun so we know where our light source is coming from. It's doing some interesting things with the light over here. I'm back to using the vine or willow charcoal, the gray one, the soft one. When you're working larger and you need really softly blended things, like maybe you're working on a portrait, or in this case, you just want this background to be way softer than it is textured, one option is to use a chamois or chamois. Don't believe I have one with me, but it's a little leather cloth, and it really pushes these fibers, this charcoal into the fibers of the paper, and makes a really smooth blending, which I think would be really advantageous at this moment, but we're going to work with what we have. I see a little bit of highlight on this back wave, a little bit over here. I see sort of like staccato moments over here, just little stripes going with the flow of the horizon. It gets a little bit lighter up here, but I don't want it too light because then it will take away from the contrast, like how nice that crisp line is. So I might stop here and crisp up my edges. You know what else you could do? You could lay down tape. Sometimes the tape will rip the page, so you have to have like a kind of painter's tape. But you could create really tidy borders by using tape and then lifting it off after. My students do that on their final drawings. I just don't worry about stuff like that in the sketchbook. Look how easy this is to erase. Most of this is the willow charcoal anyway. Here we go with our first two textures, and that's where I'll leave you today. I'm not going to do the other two. That is your homework to pick and complete two more textures. The ones I had chosen were, I chose a tree bark, and then I chose a basket weave, sort of like burlap, which is incredibly challenging. And my students always have trouble with baskets and fabrics that have like a really intricate woven type pattern. They're like, do I just do crisscross? Like, do I just do this? How do I do this? How do I get this? That's not the answer. But yeah, I'm going to leave you there. And of course, if you want to stay with me and go into a couple more advanced texture demonstrations, feel free to join me over on Patreon. I have memberships starting at, I think, $2-3, and you can get a whole different portfolio of tutorial videos over there. All right, I hope you liked this exercise, and I will see you in the next one soon.